All right, let's set the stage. Picture the mid-60s music scene right before everything broke loose. You've got these tidy pop groups in matching suits, neatly packaged 3-minute singles, and record executives comfortably calling all the shots from their high-rise offices. The formula was locked in, the money was rolling in, and the establishment, well, they really thought they had the sound of the youth perfectly contained. But underneath that shiny, polished surface, a massive, massive pressure was building. Today, in this explainer, we're diving straight into the anatomy of an absolute rupture with the raw energy of a classic rock documentary. We're looking at a year that didn't just change music incrementally, it completely shattered the landscape. 1967. For all you passionate music enthusiasts out there, you know that sometimes a single, isolated year can become completely synonymous with foundational upheaval. It becomes this permanent boundary line between the before and the after, right? So the before was a world totally dominated by the 45 RPM pop single. Quick, catchy, and let's be honest, largely disposable. But 1967 brought the after. Suddenly, we're hit with the explosive rise of the album as a unified experimental art form, heavily fueled by a rapidly expanding counterculture. What happened wasn't just some passing trend or a slight shift in public taste. No way. It was a massive event that fundamentally broke the old machine. So when we talk about a seismic shift, we are literally talking about an earthquake, a foundational change that permanently alters the landscape. I want you to really visualize an industry where the very ground underneath the record executives, the producers, and the artists themselves began to violently crack and pull apart. I mean, think about it. This was the exact year the Beatles locked themselves away in Abbey Road studios and dropped Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, completely, and I mean completely, obliterating the rulebook on what a commercial rock record could sound like. And over at the Monterey Pop Festival, Jimi Hendrix literally sets his guitar on fire. That was a loud, undeniable signal that the polite, matching suit era of rock and roll was officially dead and buried. And that brings us to this defining headline, 1967's biggest music industry shock. This isn't just an observation. It is the absolute truth of an era. That word, shock, points to the terrifying suddenness and the sheer gravity of it all. See, this wasn't some slow, comfortable transition into a new sound where everyone had time to gracefully adjust. Not at all. The old guard of record executives were caught completely flat-footed. All of a sudden, the artists were seizing control of the production process, the album artwork, and the messaging. And those traditional distribution models that relied on churning out quick pop singles? Totally disrupted because fans were suddenly demanding full-length, complex concept albums. It was an industry-wide shockwave that hit without warning, jolting the entire commercial system to its absolute core. It's actually really fascinating when you contrast the idea of a creeping underground tremor with the reality of an acute, blinding shock. The picture just snaps right into focus. The tremor was the cultural shift happening in the shadows, the underground psychedelic clubs in London, those wild avant-garde hippie happenings out in San Francisco, the experimental sound waves bouncing around offshore pirate radio stations. But the shock? The shock was the exact moment that underground movement brutally breached the surface. Boom. It was the summer of love hitting the mainstream, when those psychedelic, experimental sounds suddenly commanded global distribution channels and completely hijacked the Billboard charts. The underground didn't just politely knock on the door. They blew the entire house down. When we break down the actual anatomy of this historical moment, every single element points to unparalleled disruption. The target wasn't just a specific musical genre. It was the entire infrastructure of the music business itself. The scale was absolutely massive because it rode the undeniable, unstoppable wave of a global cultural youth rebellion. And the mechanics of that shock were intensely physical and technological. The industry saw a definitive, rapid shift from the tiny 45 RPM single to the huge 33 RPM long play record. Plus, the advent of multi-track recording was suddenly pushing the very boundaries of what could actually be captured on magnetic tape. The impact left absolutely zero room for the old guard to maintain the status quo. The business of music had essentially been irreversibly hacked by its own artists. So we have to ask ourselves, what actually happens when an entire industry fractures without warning? When the music business experiences a foundational shock in a single year like 1967? Well, those shockwaves didn't just fade away into a dusty history book. They laid the absolute bedrock for the music we consume right now, today. Think about it. The artist-driven culture, the immense importance of the album as a cohesive creative statement, the fearless blending of genres, these were all forged in the fires of that massive landscape-altering earthquake. It really leaves you burning to investigate, doesn't it? How exactly did those radical artists rewrite the rules of distribution and culture forever, ultimately creating the very musical ecosystem we're still completely obsessed with today?